In this video, we're going to look at the combat of Chrono Odyssey and the classes that are going to be available on the 20th of June for the closed beta test that hopefully you'll get in. So let's jump in, let's talk about it. So I'm going to explain the combat again, even though by now you've probably seen a few videos and figured it out. But I just want to be clear here because it kind of sets the groundwork for the rest of the class video that we're going to do. The classes work like this. There are 6 classes to pick from, or at least there will be in the full game. There's only 3 in the beta. Those 6 classes are the Assassin, Berserker, Ranger, Paladin, Sorceress, and Swordsman. But it's only the Berserker, the Ranger, and Swordsman in the beta test. Each class effectively has 3 weapons to pick from. However, you can only wield 2 weapons at any given time, and you can freely change between those weapons in combat by pressing Q. If you want to change weapon completely, as in like swap to a different weapon, then you need to be out of combat and just do that in the menu. Each weapon has 8 abilities to pick from. However, you can only have 4 per weapon active at any given moment. This means at any given point, as long as you change weapons, you have access to 8 abilities. Plus, there are these 4 abilities that are effectively class dependent, and you get these as you level up. In the beta, you couldn't actually have 4 abilities, but there are 4 slots. So I assume there's 4 to pick from. Each weapon has a talent tree, and it kind of works top to bottom. To get lower in the talent tree, you need to spend X amount of points in the corresponding thing above. There are 4 abilities on the left, 4 abilities on the right, and then passives in the middle. You also get 1 additional button, which is the Chrono Detector, which you can activate an ability by pressing C. There's several different Chrono Detector abilities. We're not going to talk about them too much here, but they basically add 1 more ability. As for the combat directly, each class does a basic attack when you do a left click. You can lock on with the middle mouse button, you can dodge, you can sprint, you can double jump, and importantly, on the right click, you basically get like a special ability that is unique to that weapon. Not necessarily always unique, I think like some of them are just going to block, but they're unique in the sense that they can be different. And if you're not using lock on, then you do need to aim your attacks and be vaguely in the right direction. When you swing to do your attacks, you'll mostly get rooted in place. Some abilities will move you. The basic attack, for example, with the greatsword, will effectively move your character forward as it lunges a little bit. One thing I've noticed is that you have to level up each weapon independently, and then the level of your class or your own personal character level, that is something completely different, right? It's 2 different things. There's your class level and then your weapon level, and you need to level them up independently. Your dodge also, by the way, is different per class. The Ranger, for example, is more of a slide. The Swordsman is more of a roll. However, there is no weight class. It's not like you do a different roll if you're in light armor versus heavy armor. If you were light armor, you'll effectively do more damage because that light armor itself will have more damage abilities on it. Whereas if you were heavy armor, you'll sacrifice damage for tankier stat. Obviously medium is somewhere in between. So that's the combat basically explained. Let's jump into actual class specific stuff now, because I think that's probably more interesting to more of you. And we're going to start with the Berserker. Now the Berserker is probably the class that I played the least, and I don't necessarily have footage of like every single ability because we didn't have that much time to film. But the Berserker is effectively an aggressive melee powerhouse. I think it's a class built for the players who like high risk, high reward. It's obviously not an assassin, but if you're looking for a melee DPS in the beta, then this is probably the class for you. And with the Berserker, you're basically playing with a couple of different things. You're playing with your health, which you can effectively sacrifice to do bigger damage, or you're playing with Bloodthirst, which effectively is more sustained. Depends on the weapon you pick and how you play. The 3 weapons that you get are the Battle Axe, the Chain Blades, and the Twin Axes. The Battle Axe is basically your heavy AoE damage weapon. These are powerful attacks that are going to consume rage. Rage is the thing that you will build over time and is effectively one of your main currencies. For a lot of classes actually, and you'll then unleash devastating blows like Whirlwind. It does also have a couple of blocks and counter attacks built into its kit though as well, which I think is why it suggests that you can possibly play this weapon as an off tank. I don't necessarily think you'd be really tanking with it in the main, but if you've got no suitable tank and you're kind of all dying, then maybe you could whack this on and try and do that. I don't know if that's going to be viable though. The Chain Blades, which by default look a little bit like cleavers, although they can actually just look like swords as well. I think the Chain Blades are going to be more crowd control and self-healing. Very agile. You're going to pull in the enemies maybe with the ability Chain Strike. You might apply slows with the ability Glacial Strike, all the while stacking Bloodthirst, which I think basically gives you a hot over time and increases the damage you do. I see Chain Blades as kind of being the middle of the 3 weapons. The Battle Axe is slow, big, heavy AoE slashes. The Chain Blades is kind of in the middle because I think like the Twin Axes is going to be like your frenzied DPS. Get in, start attacking, continue to attack, and don't stop until something's dead. either you or them, because this is going to be like high DPS, but it is going to cost your health. For example, I think the right click here sacrifices your health but gives you more damage, whereas the right click on the chain blades I think gives you health. I think there's an ability called Immortal which will very briefly prevent death, and then there's an ability called Clobber that will stack bleeds on the enemies and stuff like that. That's definitely get in, keep pumping. Each class effectively only has 3 potential pairings, and by the end game these pairings might have a completely different set of vibe than what I'm feeling right now. But I personally see that the chain blades and the twin axes working together, that's going to give you a little bit of crowd control, the healing. Then you're going to be able to unleash with the Berserk mode when you're full health by using the twin axes and just getting in there and pumping. Whether or not you'd ever be able to disengage and then go back to the chain blades and get your health back, I don't know. Then I could also see the battle axe and the twin axes also working. You get a little bit of AoE control there, single target burst. This could be ideal for people who just want to like pump the damage at close range. To be honest, I could also see the battle axe and the chain blades working for, you know, kind of the similar reason. It's hard to say which weapon combinations will be best at this point. We just simply not put enough time in the game, and I don't want to like analyze the hell out of the meta. I'm just kind of giving you an overview here. This isn't supposed to be a guide to say pick this or pick this. You should obviously just try every combination, try the weapons that you want. I'm just giving you like a basic overview. This is not a tier list or anything like that, okay? The next class we are going to talk about though is the Ranger. I played this one a little bit, like this is the middle one that I played. I played the Swordsman the most, Ranger the second. These guys are obviously the master of ranged combat. I mean, who'd have thought it? The 3 weapons you're going to get though are the bow, the crossbow, and the rapier. I think the range is going to be primarily about applying like debuffs and then potentially avoiding damage by kiting. The bow is one of the most interesting weapons that I'd seen in any of the versions, because it kind of has like this 2 different modes. You have specific unique arrows that the bow shoots, and these arrows you can change. For example, there's like a freeze, a burn, a poison, an incendiary, and an impact arrow, I think. Maybe more, can't remember off the top of my head. You can change these relatively easy on the fly by this like radial wheel. I think you do that by pressing Alt, by the way. And what's interesting about this though is that when you aim down sights, that's when you use these arrows, these special arrows, and you only get about 7 of them. And if you are aiming down the sights and shooting these arrows, it does actually cost you stamina, but if you're not aiming down sights, then you just use normal arrows and it doesn't cost you any stamina. Aiming down sights here is the right click, by the way. The bow obviously has all the classic abilities like a charged shot, which I think does a stun, and then there's slows, aim shots for just damage, all that kind of stuff, right? The bow is very interesting and I think relatively versatile. I could see the bow being used quite a bit. However, I'm not convinced it's as good as the crossbow. The crossbow, or I think even more precisely the dual crossbows, because it looks kind of cool when you're shooting both of them, feels like it's going to be high precision sustained damage. This is going to focus on building like your critical stack potentials, they're called precision, and it's going to have abilities like a venom shot and rapid fire stance, where you're obviously going to shoot a lot of shots at once. It looks like it's relatively sustained DPS, but when you play it, it kind of felt like the crossbow was like a little bit like hitting like wet noodles, whereas the bow was like, you know, a bit beefier. But I think the crossbow ultimately might end up being better. Death by 1,000 cuts rather than just stabbing somebody once. And then the third weapon is the rapier, which I definitely didn't use. I just literally went bow and crossbow. But the rapier I think is all about like agile melee combat. Keep in mind if you're playing a ranger, you're probably going to be wearing light armor. So the rapier is all about being swift, precise, melee attacks, get in, apply some debuffs, maybe like poison, reduce the enemy's defenses, reposition with like the counter attack. All about staying mobile and trying not to get hit. However, I think the best bet is literally to just play the bow and the crossbow and to kite. However, maybe the rapier is good. If you're going to play the rapier, I could definitely see either the rapier or the crossbow or the bow. I think maybe rapier crossbow might be the best, but it's too early to judge like a meta right now. Again, I'm not trying to do a meta. It's way too early. I don't want to do that. I'm giving you more of an overview of the classes rather than this is the best thing, pick this. The next class is the one that I played the most of, and I probably have played the most of in every test, and that is the Swordsman. The Swordsman's really interesting because I think it's the first one that has a proper role from the Holy Trinity. I think the Swordsman will be the archetypal best tank class. However, it's relatively versatile, right? It's got damage weapons, it's got tankiness, it's got big slow hits with the greatsword. It's a very interesting weapon. Very flexible, I think we would say, with this class. The sword and shield, as I just sort of like alluded to, it's all about tanking, control, CC, that kind of thing. It's going to have classic exceptional defensive capabilities here, where it's going to block damage, taunt enemies with battle cry. There's counter attacks, there's like shield bashes that's going to stun your enemies. There's strong defensive debuffs here with like steadfast defense. Yeah, there's quite a bit in here, right? I didn't actually play with the sword and shield because I wanted to go a little bit more aggressive, but I could definitely see this being used in a lot of builds for sure. As for the damage weapons, well, then you have dual blades, which if I'm honest really just felt like dual daggers. This is all about fast DPS and kind of trying to manage your threat here a little bit. It's sort of good for generating threat if that's what you want, but if you're trying to do DPS without building threat, then you obviously need to pick the abilities that are going to not do the threat and just do the damage. I think if you're going to play a tank, then you'd use dual blades and sword and shield because, you know, it builds threat, does damage, yeah, looks good. But the third weapon is the greatsword. Now this is all about kind of like burst and crowd control. When I was playing this, there was often like this combination that I would do that didn't require any rage. Rage is the currency that you build up, by the way, passively. Pretty much, I think almost all the classes have that. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe the sorcerer will have mana or something like that. But effectively, I would do this ability that would knock them down. It would basically like bring them to me and then I would kick them down. And then there was another sword attack where I would like stab this one dude and then swing him around and knock everybody over. So it's effectively got like CC, crowd control, and then burst, right? Because it's a big giant sword. If you manage to hit somebody with like a big ability, then it does a lot of damage. It's a heavy hitting weapon, which is ideal for stunning, controlling enemy groups, right? There's Groundbreaker, which I think will do like an AoE stun, but it's all about managing your rage here. I personally found it hard to actually build rage with the greatsword, simply because the attacks were so slow. As a DPS class here, I wanted to play as the dual blades and greatsword because I was like, that's going to give me the most DPS. So that's what I did whilst I was leveling. I do wonder if the sword and shield is just going to be so good and so versatile that you should probably play it in every single role. Probably going to be better for PvP, I would assume, as well as tanking, just with different abilities selected. Obviously, it's way too early to talk about that, but yeah, I don't know. It's the swordsman's a very interesting class. By default, it gives you like heavy armor, whereas the ranger I think is light armor. I assume the berserker's medium, although I didn't actually check. You could, however, literally just put yourself in light armor and just start being a pure raw thoroughbred DPS. The good thing about this game is that the choice is kind of yours. It feels like you can literally do either role just as well as any other class in any other game. Like, I feel like the swordsman, you can be a proper tanky boy if you want to be in a, you know, an actual tank, or you can go light armor and be a pure thoroughbred DPS. That's kind of cool. Well, that's a little bit of an overview of the three classes that we had. Probably a bit early to start looking in depth at each specific class, talking about abilities and stuff like that. This was more just an overview to maybe let you think about what you're going to get into if you do get into the beta, maybe which class you actually want to play there. Obviously, I recommend you try them all. At the start of the game, if you pick a class, you basically get your full class kit right at the very start, which is very good and very cool because it lets you try out the different classes with the full kit. So do that, right? There's no reason not to. It's literally going to take you like 20 minutes. Obviously, you're going to want to play the full game as well, but by the end of the test, make sure you do that. Make sure you try every class because it's just worth it. Right, I'm off. Let me know your thoughts. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.